Feasibility Study and Facilities Program for the Deaf Culture Center of New Mexico. Report number 2, Facilities Program, February 2013. Update on project progress. Report to PCD. Report to CDHH and DCC. End of first phase of project. Next phase, path to building the complex. Demographics. Study done for housing. Estimated deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing population. $255,000 in New Mexico, 110,000 in Albuquerque. This number will increase in the next 30 years. The Culture Center should be located nearby the housing. The housing complex will attract deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing people from other states. The apartment complex will need to be accessible for all persons with disabilities. The estimated need is 40 to 70 apartment units. CCM advised 50 to 60 units. Space needs. This slide shows a diagram of the different aspects of the cultural center. Cultural, social, recreational, educational, residential, and commercial. Space needs. Cultural. Within the cultural part of the Deaf Culture Center will be an atrium where exhibits can be displayed, a library, gift shop, computer lab, play space for children, offices for community organizations, and a conference room. Space needs. that are cultural. This diagram shows the different space needs within the culture center. Space needs, cultural. The owner and operator of this part of the center would be the DCC. The users would be the DCC, the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing community, and also the general public. Funding. For construction, private and/or state funding would be used. For operations, private funding. This part of the facility would not generate revenue. Privacy issues. This part of the facility would be open to the public and would be very visible. Space needs, recreational. This part of the facility would include a multi-purpose room that could be used for dining, an auditorium, or a gym. It would also have meeting rooms, classrooms, and outdoor playing fields. Space needs, recreational. This is a diagram of the recreational spaces in the Culture Center. Space needs, recreational. The owner and operator would be the DCC. Users would be the DCC, the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing community, the general public for rentals, and other partner organizations. For funding, construction would require private and/or state funding. Operations funding would be private. This part of the facility would be revenue generating. This part of the facility would be open to the public and very visible. Space needs, residential. This part of the facility is apartments for senior citizens and families. There would be 1 and 2 bedroom units available. There would be other facilities located in the apartment complex, including a computer room, meeting room, space for extra storage, and a lounge. Outdoor space would consist of a courtyard. Space needs, residential, shows a diagram with a multi-story apartment complex. Space needs, residential. Owner and operator would be the developer. Users would be the residents. Funding for construction will come from the developer. Funding for operations will also come from the developer. This part of the facility will generate revenue for the developer and their investors. Privacy and security are critical for the residents. The apartment complex must be located nearby transportation, grocery stores, parks or post offices, and needs to be accessible to transportation. Space needs, commercial. If included in the residential building, these businesses must support residents' needs. They can also serve the general public. Ideas for businesses include a cafe, a clinic, small businesses, or deaf services organizations. Space needs, commercial. This diagram shows commercial businesses located on the first floor of the facility, with residential apartments on the upper levels. Space needs, commercial. The owner and operator would be the developer. Users would be residents and the general public. Funding for construction would come from the developer. Funding for operations would also come from the developer. This part of the facility would generate revenue for the developer and their investors. These businesses would be open to the public. Space needs, social. This part of the facility could have office space for public agencies like DVR, CDHH, the Agency for Aging and Long-Term Assistance, GCD, or SSA. There could also be offices for private or nonprofit services like NMRID, SILC, or COPD. This part of the facility would also have conference rooms, support services, possibly a group home. This diagram shows the space needs for the social part of the facility. Space needs, social. Owner and operator would be the state of New Mexico. Users would be the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing community. Funding for construction and operations would come from the state of New Mexico. This part of the facility would possibly be revenue generating in rent to private services providers. Confidentiality is a critical component for these offices. They would need to have a separate access. Space needs, educational. This part of the facility could have a public school, perhaps a charter school like ASLA. Space needs, commercial. The owner and operator would be a public charter school. Users would be school students and parents, and the community after hours. Funding would come from the state of New Mexico. Privacy and security for the children is critical. Space needs, total space summary. This is a diagram that shows all the different space areas within the cultural center. If everything is included, the total floor plan needed would be 104,810 square feet. Priorities. The first priority is the culture center with cultural and recreational spaces. The second priority is for residential space that would have apartments and commercial spaces. The third priority, social spaces. That includes service provider offices or group homes. The fourth priority is educational space. Priorities. This is a diagram that shows priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4, and priority 5. Site needs. Site needs summary. This diagram totals all of the area that would be needed if all of these priorities were created. The total area of land needed is 4.10 acres. Site needs summary. This picture shows what 4 acres looks like. It's the total space for the Civic Plaza downtown. Site needs by priority. This diagram shows priority 1, priority 2, priority 3 and 4, and priority 5 with the amount of parking space that would be needed. Site needs. Site selection criteria. The site has to be centralized in the metro area. It needs to be 2.5 to 4.5 acres. Prefer publicly owned, to use public funds for development. Prefer corner lot with 2 access points. Near transportation. Near things like grocery stores, libraries, parks, community centers, restaurants, C&M or UNM. It needs to be safe and accessible. It needs to be an attractive area with low crime, allowable uses by zoning code, HUD qualified census tracts. Site needs amenities. This is a map of Albuquerque showing the location of parks, community centers, libraries, and bus routes. Site needs walkability. This is a map of Albuquerque showing areas that are easy and comfortable to walk around in. Site needs redevelopment zones. Redevelopment zones are areas that the city has special funding for to redevelop. Census tracts. This is a map of Albuquerque showing areas that are low income and can get tax credits and other benefits. Site needs site search results. This map shows 2 sites of interest. Number 1 is owned by the state of New Mexico. Number 2, owned by the city of Albuquerque. Other sites that were found are privately owned and would need a lot of money to purchase. Costs. ARC researched the price of properties in Albuquerque that meet the site requirements. Prices ranged from $5.50 a square foot to $12 a square foot. If the money is available to purchase a property that meets the site needs for all the priorities, including apartments and commercial, the least that property would cost is about $1 million. The most it would cost is about $2 million. If the property only fits the top priority, cultural and recreational, and does not include the residential and commercial or the other priorities, then the property costs would range from about $380,000 to $830,000. The reason the residential and commercial have been separated out for this analysis is because those properties will need to be owned privately by the developer in order to be eligible for tax credits. Costs. Cost to build. The first priority for DCC is about $4.2 million. The end.